Yes.
Amen, 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 Shemora. Amen, amen, amen. Amen, 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 Shemora. Amen, amen.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this latest in a series of conversations about music in challenging times brought to you by the Zamir Choral Foundation. My name is Jerry Skolnick. I'm the rabbi of the Forest Hills Jewish Center here in New York City and Queens, and I'm also a vice president of the Zamir Choral Foundation and proud and honored to serve in that capacity. Today, I have the great privilege of being a host for this remarkable conversation between two of the more exceptional personalities in the world of Jewish music. One of them, whose golden voice you just heard, is Chazan Alberto Mizrahi, who many people have referred to over the years as the Jewish Pavarotti, a Greek-born tenor, one of the world's leading interpreters of Jewish music, and also Chazan of the historic Anshe Emet Synagogue in Chicago. Alberto has thrilled audiences worldwide in Jewish music recitals, symphony concerts, and opera. And he is a master of both Ashkenazic and Sephardic musical traditions, displaying an absolutely thrilling tenor voice, whether on stage or on the bima. He has been an integral part of the Zamir Chorale for approximately 50 years, as well as a board member of the Zamir Choral Foundation over many years. He's received so many spectacular notices around the world for his performances. If you've heard his voice, as you just heard a little teaser there in the music playing us in, you know the prodigious talent that he is. And of course, we're joined, as always, by Maestro Matthew Lazar, the founder and the director of the Zamir Choral Foundation, who has created and fostered and nurtured the Renaissance in Jewish choral music in North America. He's the conductor of the Zamir Chorale and has created the North American Jewish Choral Festival, Hazamir, the International Jewish Teen Choir, and Zamir Noded. He has conducted choral and choral orchestral Jewish theme concerts across the United States and Israel, and he has conducted also the great cantors of this generation. For me personally, professionally and personally, it's a great thrill and a remarkable pleasure to be serving as the host of this conversation. If, with the permission of both the artists, I'm going to refer to them by the names that I got to know them by, and that's Mati and Abe, although Mati's professional name is Matthew Lazar, and Abe's is Chazan Alberto Mizrahi. But I'm going to take a little bit of privilege because Alberto became a part of the Zamir Chorale and the world of Zamir just about the same time that I did. And I can distinctly remember actually sitting in the tenor section where I sang next to, actually many times I sat in between Alberto Mizrahi and Henry Rosenblum. And I discovered really early on in my career with the Zamir Chorale that it wasn't particularly necessary for me to vocalize at all. I learned if I moved my lips, particularly on the opening notes of Bernstein's Chichester Psalms, when the tenors came in on a high A, I just had to look good and depend on Alberto and Henry, and I was golden. So I remember, Alberto, meeting you and hearing you sing Mizmor LeDavid for the first time and saying, wow, he belongs here. I'm not sure why I'm here. And my friendship with Mati goes back all those years as well, back to when he was also a member of the Zamir Chorale. So for me personally, half a century later, I'm a little wary of saying that, but half a century later, here we are still in each other's universes, and what a great thrill that is, and what a privilege it is for me personally. So Abe and Mati are going to talk to each other and with us this afternoon about the role of music in a challenging time. Abe has an incredible story to tell. Mati is absolutely the right person to be in dialogue with him. So Mati, without further ado, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jerry, and thank you for that journey down memory lane. Thank you, Abe, for joining us, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. Abe, you and I have been together professionally and in a friendship way for a long time, as Jerry has mentioned. And we've been on stage in a concert hall. We've been on the bima in a shul for a very, very long time, many, many decades. And there are similarities and differences between what happens on the concert hall and what happens on the bima. And I'd like you to share with everyone with a very specific example of Kol Nidre. You mentioned it a little earlier while people were joining. Kol Nidre, what does it feel for you when you're singing Kol Nidre in a shul, with a choir, without a choir? And what about when you're singing Kol Nidre in concert? And then finally, what is it to sing Kol Nidre by Arnold Schoenberg under the baton of Riccardo Muti?
That's a very simple question. It's fascinating. You know, if you have to look at the history of Jewish music a little bit to understand that Kol Nidre could, until the 20th century, would never be played in a concert hall. And the people that started Jewish music of the modern age, you know, we're talking Sulzer, we're talking Naumburg, we're talking Lewandowski, who took kind of a falling, you know, yucky kind of shul experience and made it into a Western thing where you know, if you could hear Schubert, you could also hear Kol Nidre in a certain way, especially if there was a choir, which Lewandowski put everything with choir. For me, there is, of course, a difference, but I think one of the things I pride myself, and I don't think anybody else prides me in it, but I do because I think about it, is that no matter whether I'm on bima or on stage, I have the same feelings about music and about the words, especially the words. Kol Nidre being really not one of these, oh, I'm going to cry, it's Kol Nidre, because if you know the words, it's you know, it's a legal document, and but with God. Which makes a slight difference. I got to tell you, if I don't close my eyes before singing on the bima or on the stage, I feel as if I'm somewhere else. So if that's the answer to your question, I can continue. But if I do feel there is a feeling that music brings to your heart, and my fear is that as the famous cantors, by the way, you know, this whole cantor singing on a bima, on a stage, started in the 20th century. Until then, it was kind of helter-skelter, but when all these famous guys from Europe moved because of whatever reasons they were being, you know, the pogroms, the wars, when they moved to America, they created something, because in America we have producers and promoters, and they created something that will never leave us, although it has already left.
Abe, do you feel any different? Is there any difference in your psychology when you're acting as a shaliach tzibur, a representative of the congregation, speaking with God, and when you're performing for an audience?
There's a huge difference, but there's a huge similarity. The huge difference is that on a stage, you may not be singing liturgical words or liturgical music. I did that a lot. And by the way, Ballo in Maschera is not a liturgical work, but when I heard Pavarotti, I was understudying Pavarotti in Miami, the only time that ever happened, and hearing him was a religious experience. But when you're on the bima, there are two things going on in your mind. One, if you're me, I improvise everything, because I know the words, and I want to feel a certain way some Shabbos, and that's how I daven. And if I feel a different way, I daven. But what happens on the bima, though, is you are saying the words. You are saying the words. I know that many of the people in the congregation are not, but they're expecting you to do it. So there's a responsibility, and the way I feel I can transmit that music, the words of that music, to the congregation are by doing it beautifully, or as beautifully as I can, and interpreting the words in, by the way, a whole thing. You know, we're not going to get into, you know, what did it sound like in Germany as opposed to Russia, as opposed to Poland, as opposed to, you know, Hungary, Greece. Greece, I don't know anything about because I was 8 years old when I left, but I do speak Greek. That's my favorite thing. Anyway, but I do feel that I owe it to the congregation to interpret the words the way I feel them, because I feel if I feel them, they'll feel them.
When I picked you on the bima, and I've seen you on the bima and been with you on the bima, I have two different visions of you, and I'm wondering if you could speak to the difference between facing the Aron Kodesh, the Holy Ark, and facing the congregation, the Kahal.
Well, that's something that made itself obvious, how it was going to have to be after I was a chazan for 10, 20 years. In truth, there's nothing quite like, especially in an Orthodox shul, where you approach right in the center of the beam of the ark and the Aron. You come and you're right in front of the Aron, and you are speaking to God. That's a moment, and it only happens to me now when I sing, like in Poland or somewhere, you know, when we have the things and we daven there, we daven in an Orthodox shul, and everybody steps up. I really love that experience. We are not in that world anymore, I'm afraid to say, especially in the conservative and reform, for sure, but conservative. The reform, by the way, may I be against one thing that I wish Chazanim wouldn't take it on as being, oh, this is what we must do. So they want to sound really good over the microphones, and they're wearing these things, you know, from their ear to their mouth on the bima. They're saying, okay, that's all. I said it, it's gone. And so my thing is that when I face the people, the connection between them, you know what? God's always listening. It's always there, always. There's no problem. In fact, you want to know what my, I better not tell you. I was going to tell you my what's it called? My philosophy about being Jewish and about being a God believer. And I think all of us at my age, I'm not young anymore. I hate that. But I think that everybody has their own sort of feelings about it. I feel God's always there because we are part of God. So if we're part of God, we're connected to God. We're always there. He's always there. She's always there. We are always there. So what's the big deal? The big deal is reminding people who don't think about it too much that when you're on the bima and you can bring them in to Hashem through the words in the Siddur, I like it. I like facing the bima and making connection with people. I really do.
So the difference for you is being in direct, unadulterated contact with the ark and therefore with God, and it's just you and God. And you feel the audience on your back, so to speak.
Oh, yeah. It's very pleasing to me to be by the ark and davening to Hashem and not having to think about, oh, have I said hello to them recently? Or this when someone's died, or, you know, if somebody's sick, and you don't want to think all that stuff. But I've gotten quite used to seeing people, enjoying that they're there. And then when I'm saying the words, when I'm singing the words, and remember, I'm improvising most of the time, so I can't just let it go anywhere. I find the music does it for Hashem, and the connection, that face-to-face does it for the congregation.
Jerry, when he introduced you, mentioned part of your great tool of skill sets, which is your comfort with being Ashkenazi and Sephardi. And I'm thinking of all the recordings that we've done together. My favorite group of recordings is the Chant Mystique recordings that your great friend Ricardo Rosenkrantz produced, and it was my pleasure to meet him and become friends with him 20 years ago. And what was so wonderful about that set of recordings was, besides the fact we had the greatest set of choral singers, all of whom had perfect pitch and beyond human vocal ranges, but that it allowed us to explore so many centuries and so many styles of music making. From Gregorian chant, the Jewish version, or maybe the Jewish origin of Gregorian chant, and canonic things, and pedal points where you would just improvise your strong suit, as you said. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the difference between the Ashkenazi vocal tradition, the Sephardi tradition. Maybe give us a little bit of a tease of what you sound like when you do a little of each.
I'm getting old. Ashkenaz, German, really 19th century, maybe 18th, maybe 17th. Nobody really knows where it came from. People say it comes from France, from the the French Jewish Ashkenazic thing.
I learned 16th century, by the way.
Whatever. The point being that it's fantastic music, and it's been, once it was set to choirs and organs in some places, and the funny thing is people actually come to hear 3 times standing. It's unbelievable, but it works because it's not the words, it's the music in that case. Sephardim.
Abe, I want to interrupt you for a quick sec. Since you mentioned Kol Nidre 3 times, we usually did, and usually in most cases when the chazan has a choir, the choir sings the first time and the third time, and the middle time is just the chazan.
Yeah, but the chazan's singing with the choir.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. But you're not accompanied. So what does that feel like to you? Is it invigorating? What comes through your bloodstream?
The Kol Nidre?
During the middle Kol Nidre, that's not there when you're kind of locked into what the choir has to sing.
It's been so long since I did that I can't even remember. I have 3 numbers. I have many numbers, but the 3 numbers that I use there are 2. The first and third are bookends, sort of like here's how it starts, this is how it ends, and the middle. And then I switch them because the one that really gets everybody is not Kol Nidre, but the one that goes Kol Nidre, and you start on an E, and people go whoa, and it makes for a very. I feel the passion. I think if I were not to sing the middle thing, that I would need an all Jewish choir that knows what they're saying with a Jewish conductor, and I don't have that. So I can only say that it's up to me.
Let me redirect you back to, you were saying the difference between the Ashkenazi, which you just gave an example of, and the Sephardi.
It's too difficult a thing to really explain. The Sephardim, now we have Sephardim that came from Spain. Where did they come from to Spain? From the Middle East, right? From all those countries. Then they went up to what? If you ended up in Amsterdam, then you were influenced by the Western style. It didn't become German, which was completely Western style, but there was they still were moments of the old Spanish, but it's very Western to me compared to what quote unquote Sephardi. And I'm not sure we're talking about Sephardim. We might be talking about Edot HaMizrach more, you know what I mean? Because when I went to Turkey is when I was blown over completely. They have 4, 5, 6 chazanim there in different shuls, but because I was there with another couple of chazanim doing concert, they brought 3 or 4 of them to daven for us, you know what I mean? And it's, as opposed to Kol Nidre, it would be Kol Nidre. Wait a minute, what makam was that? And they would kill me if they heard me saying that that's what they sound like, because they don't. Theirs is very beautiful, very clean and meaningful, but it's in a completely different makam. The Sephardic, the Sephardic music that we think of as Sephardi are in different modes than we use, because they're the Middle Eastern modes. They're the way they used to be. At least we think they sounded that way, because who knows what was 1,000, 2,000 years ago. But that is what we consider Sephardic music. Ashkenaz, it can be, you can follow the history of Ashkenaz, 13th century Germany, you have France, you have all these places, and they all have their own additions in France, they take some French little stuff, and in Amsterdam they take that, you know. But so really, it all stems from the Sephardic, from the Mizrahi. It stems from the Middle East, and I love that music. You know, I really love it. So we do a lot. I sneak in some of that, you know, in the thing, and I do a lot of Sephardic music, or what we call Sephardic. It really should be called Edot Mizrahi music.
When we were recording and we sang, you sang Mi Al Har Chorev, which is one of the most extant pieces of Jewish music ever notated, that we have the founder of the Jewish Theological Seminary to be grateful that he found it in the Cairo Geniza.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. But that sounded so much like Gregorian chant. And when we performed it and when you sang it, you managed to bridge the gap between what sounds to the Western ear, even to the contemporary Jewish ear, as Gregorian chant, and the makamot, the modes, as you were just talking about, that one would hear if we were listening to someone worshiping in Istanbul. Do you remember any of that you could share?
I don't forget things like that. That was one of the greatest moments of my musical career. You and the choir, and me improvising in a mode I didn't even know which it was. It was just in me, you know what I mean? It was like pouring out. And I said, well, let's see where this goes. And boy, did it go. It went places. But you see, we know who wrote that tune, or who wrote down that tune, the original, right? He was a Franciscan monk who converted to Judaism. I'm not going to give the whole story. He ends up going looking for other Jews in Europe. He gets stabbed. He was in the Middle East looking for things. He was a Franciscan monk, but he turned into a big Jew. And while he was, where was it? I forgot where he found it, but he heard this, No. Where the original guy was traveling and he heard this tune.
Because he was trained as a monk, he was able to notate music.
Right. And he wrote those diamond size, size thing. It was the first music writing down. But the point is that he heard this in its original, and he wrote it down in its monkish sound. So he writes, Mi al har chorev amiti o da da di da 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 di da 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 di da di da da. Can you get more, can you go more Catholic than that? I don't think so, or Franciscan. But the music is so beautiful. It really, it grabs you, right? And then we said, well, I said, did I actually talk this over with you, or did I just start doing it?
No, I just gave a pedal point and I let you jump off the cliff.
Yeah, it was the weirdest thing. It was, and I go, it's not that at all, but you got to listen to the tape, this thing. I used to know this by heart. I used to do it a few times. It's too hard.
Since you came, you were describing how when you started singing it, it came out of you as if from an ancient memory. So I'd like to ask you, since everybody knows who you are, but not too many people know your story. So would you tell us how a little Greek boy managed to come to America and end up becoming Alberto Mizrahi?
Have you ever heard of Beshert? Everybody knows what Beshert is, right? It was meant to be. If you were to believe in angels, I think I have one, because somehow my entire life, which came from a poor family, not that we couldn't eat. I mean, in Greece, you don't go hungry unless you're like in a farm somewhere by yourself and there's nobody else around. We did well. My father worked. My mother did not. She was a lady of the house. And the point is that we had a decent life, and we had friends and relatives. And one day my mother said to my father, we're going to America. He says, what are you talking about? In Greece, for me to get into high school would cost a lot of money, much more than we had. College, that's like a dream. Even today in Greece, you have to get into an Athenian college or university, you have to be like top of the top. Thank God my cousins are in. And she said, look, he's smart. I guess at that time I was bright. Not to now, I don't think so. But in those days I was bright. And the house all the time. My mother actually went to the Odeon, the music school in Athens, at the same time as Maria Callas. Maria did better, considerably. But the fact is that they were friends for a while. But she said, no, we have to go. And they went to the highest organization, you all know, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. And after a couple of years, or 3 years of preparation and everything else, when I was 8, she started this when I was 5. When I was 8, we got our papers to America. It's a long story. We got to America. And what does a Jewish community, we were sent to Cleveland. Why? Because we had no idea where to go. So they said, send us someplace good. And they sent us to Cleveland, which was fabulous. Because unless a family has friends or relatives someplace, they're going to get lost in New York or Los Angeles or even Chicago. But in Cleveland, which was a much more tight-knit community, smaller and quite wealthy, they under, like, I don't know, took 2 months before. I'm not going to tell the whole story because it's a long story. But we were staying in the house of the mother of the principal of the Hebrew Academy of Cleveland. It's a bashert. It's all bashert, you know. And she called him and says, this kid can be beaten up on the streets. You got to do something. They put me in the Hebrew Academy. Irving Stone, Oliver Sholem, may he be blessed forever. He's been gone for a while. But he was the owner of the American Greetings, which is not a small company. And it was not public in those days. So he did things like he built the Telz Stone. Do you know about Telz Stone? As you're coming out of Yerushalayim, on top of the hill, there's a little town, and it's only for guys to study Gemara and not have to work. He built that, housing, everything. And that's just one thing. He gave from his heart to Judaism. He was an amazing guy. So Irving Stone, when I became the Chazan in Cleveland 40 years later, 30 years or what it was, saw me at a very famous wedding. I'm not going to get into all the details. And he comes to me and he says, Chazan, it was a couple of drinks. He says, Canner, he says, I remember when I brought you from Greece. He says, I had these 3 guys come over and always used to give people stuff. But he said, the 3 guys came to my office. I sit at the desk. He says, we got this kid. You got to help. He said, yeah, where's he from? And he says, from Greece. He says, there's no Jews in Greece. What, are you kidding me? So it took a half hour of my time to explain where the Jews are in Greece. He says, I was from Bialystok. He says, I know where Jews are from. Well, guess what? I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I just disappeared. I disappeared.
Okay. Welcome back.
I apologize. I have no idea what happened there.
No problem. I thought you were going to come back in with a high G or a high, A, but
you know, I haven't had enough to drink. Let's just continue.
I'm going to, you were in the middle of.
You want to cut that out, don't you? You want to cut that out? It was too long a story. I know. Go ahead.
But let's move to the topic as advertised, which is music in challenging times. And when I think of that subject, and I think of you, the first thing that actually comes to my mind is a story you once told me about being a passenger in a plane under duress. Are you still there, Abe?
I'm still here. Well, you're talking about when it took us 20 hours to get to.
No, not that flight from Greece. When you were a passenger in a plane, and there was a lot of turbulence.
Oh, that was Oh, yeah. How can you remember that?
That was a challenging time. I remember it well.
It was winter, and I was looking for a position, my first position, and I went to Minneapolis. And I realized that was not the place for me, and they realized that was not the place for me. And I was flying home. In those days, they had these, small planes, like 70 people, 80 people. Caravel, it was called, the Caravel. And the plane's doing this, It was a horrible, horrible flight. And it was Erev Christmas. So Erev Christmas, and these people are flying, and I'm looking at music, and I was looking at Pis Chazonis or something to get over the lady comes over to me. She says, are you a musician? I said, yeah. She says, do you know the songs, the Christmas songs? Well, I don't know the words for most of them. She says, it would do so much good. I said, listen, if you're willing to feed me the words, I know the music, you know. So she takes me up to the front, gives me the microphone, and I sang Christmas tunes. I don't know, 5 pieces, you know, and you should see the people that were applauding, smiling, sitting. It was one of the real, it shows you what humans can do for humans. It never left me, that feeling, you know. You don't forget that.
Yeah, a number of people in the chat room want you to finish the story you were in the middle of from Cleveland. So maybe you can continue.
No, I think we were discussing about why I feel so lucky and always have. Look, I married Debbie, and she's the best thing that ever happened to my life. We had Belina after a lot of try, and Belina's the greatest kid I've ever met in my life, and I'm in love all the time. It's a beautiful. I feel good. I feel good about life. I'm not so great about getting older. You know, the shul, and I was looking for a younger. It's not that I can't daven. It's that. And I won't be around forever, let's face it. Also, I like golf. All right, so the answer is that this gentleman paid for my education all the way through. When I get to the seminary, they send me to the gentleman that owned a big clothing manufacturer. I'm supposed to sing a song. He puts me in the middle. They had a Sephardic shul in the middle. So I sang something, but Ashkenazic. I didn't know any Sephardic stuff at the time. And they give me enough money to live on for that year. And then, you know, okay, and let's face it, God gave me a voice. You know, my mother gave me a voice. That's, and thank God. I think the reason that I advanced as much as I could is that I owed it to my parents for all they gave their heart, they gave their souls, they gave their lives, actually, in many ways, to bring me where I could be and do what I've become. And I always felt I owe it to them.
You've been a cantor and a chazan for many years in many cities. Sometimes when we read the Torah, we get a chance to recount all the travelings of the people of Israel and all the places they stayed. Can you do a quick connect the dots?
Immediately. You know what? I wrote it down just in case you asked this question. I swear. All right. So I went to Hebrew school in Athens. We moved to the United States in 1956. I told you my mother's story. I told, I won't tell that one. Then I went to the Hebrew Academy of Cleveland. Then I went to the Hebrew Theological College Yeshiva in Skokie, Illinois. Then I went to the Jewish Theological Cantors Institute. And Max Wahlberg taught me all my nusach, and Johanna Spector taught me that there were Jews other than the Ashkenazim. That was one of the big, there were so many people. She's an ethnomusicologist, was fabulous ethnomusicologist, brilliant. She once dressed up as a Yemenite so she could sneak into Yemen and tape their songs before they were lost. I mean, we're talking ethnomusicology. She taught me so much, and I'm one of the only ones that has like book this much of notes. I didn't take notes anywhere else. I learned everything by heart, but not hers. And that's part of what made me go back to my Sephardic roots in concert and various other things. Anyway, she is very important. Then David Kozovitsky shows up one year, or 2 years even, and he was coaching us at the seminary. David Kozovitsky. Okay. Then Moshe Genchov. That's it. I mean, I studied with Moshe Genchov for 15, 20 years over the thing. He taught me how to be a chazan. He taught me how you interpret words with music that's so ingrained in you that it can't go wrong. He's amazing. He was amazing. And I've tried everything I can to do the same. Every Shabbos is different. Oh, we have tunes. Without tunes, we could die. If I had a guitar, I might be able to stay here another 10 years. But it's not what's happening. So that's what I did. Then the shuls, while I was at the JTS, I was the chazan of the, you should pardon the expression, Oyster Bay Jewish Center. That was, by the way, that happened at the, what's that coffee shop? Alavram, you know, in the village. So I went there one day, it was right after Yom Tov, or maybe during Yom Tov, don't ask that. You don't ask these questions. So I went over there, and Alavram, the guy stands up, and he says, oh, we're going to have a song, a Sephardic song by the, you should pardon the expression, of Oyster Bay Jewish Center cantor. You know, it was pretty, so I kept that. Then I went to Temple Israel in White Plains. No? Albany. That's what I mean. I went to Temple Israel in Albany, which was a tremendous experience, a huge shul. I was a brand new chazan, you know, and it really gave me all the beginning. There was nothing I didn't do at Temple Israel. I mean, I used to put the bulletin together on the ground because there were no things like, you know, anyway, so I used to put the things with my finger. All right, I went to there. Then from there, I went to Cincinnati. Oh, Maine. Okay, Cincinnati was the greatest experience of my life because there was a rabbi there who was what was his yeshiva? Not Bells, something from Europe. He was one of these real Orthodox guys in a conservative shul. And he used to come up to me and say things, I hope you don't mind, this is good stuff. He used to say to me, Abe, I was Babe still, I'll tell you why I'm Alberto in a minute. He says, oh no, he said, he'd never call me Abe. He said, Chazan, you got about 40 minutes. Let's hear something from Musaf. You know, that's the only time I ever experienced that. And of course, it was for three of the greatest years. Then we went to White Plains. And that's a long story, but that's where I got my whole thing where I was doing shul and I was doing opera and I was becoming an opera singer, which was always my dream. You didn't ask about my father taking me to the movies when I was 5 years old. And the reason I wanted to be an opera singer so much is I had never been out with my father alone. My mother was in a hospital for 2 days. She's fine. She was fine. We went to this theater, this movie theater. I was 5. And sitting upside, it was outdoors, but it was indoors. You know, that's in Greece. And the thing opens up. We didn't have a television. I never heard anything but radio with my mother singing in the room. That was it. That's my whole experience of all of a sudden goes blah, 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 and Technicolor. And who appears on the stage? Mario Lanza in The Great Carousel. The first thing I ever saw. Not television, this is the first thing. And it was a lightning bolt. I swear to you, I would not lie. I tell this all the time. It hit me in the stomach and it said, this is what you're going to do. I was 5 years old. I never forgot it. Never.
And you're living.
And the feeling is still there. I'm lucky that my mother gave me a voice.
Well, that's always been a dream of many cantors, to be able to have a career as a cantor and a career as an opera singer or sing in the operatic world. I want to go, thanks for that little journey there.
I'm almost finished.
Okay.
White Plains. All right, I did the Pavarotti competition while I was in White Plains. That's a long story, well, I will not tell. Then eventually I understudied Ballo in Maschera with Pavarotti. I did it in English, he did it in Italian. He was better, a lot better. Yeah, in fact, that was when I decided, enough. I've had all this opera. It's not a great, in fact, it was a horrible life. You know, when you're out there making a little money and you're staying in motels and, please. So I said to myself, you know, I'm doing so well as a chazan. I love davening. Why? It's enough. I did Ballo in Maschera, understudying Pavarotti. Enough! Go home. I went home. Baruch Hashem. La Jolla, we went to La Jolla for 5 years because my friend bought me basically. 3 years I was there. It was the greatest thing, but you can't make a living. I mean, you can't make an opera, not a concert career out of La Jolla. You're flying through, forget it. And finally, Park Synagogue in Cleveland, which was fantastic. I did nothing but daven. And then 30 years at Anshe Emet. 30 years. So that's a lot of shuls, but this is a lot of, I feel very proud of the fact that I've been here 30 years and it feels great. We've had, by the way, I created the Kaplan concert. It's a long story, but Theo Bickel, Dave Brubeck and his quartet and orchestra, we did his in fact, we did this piece, which is called what? I forgot already. Oh, Gates of Justice. Yeah. Gates of Justice. Yeah, and the last time we did it 14 times with Dave Brubeck. Can you imagine being on stage with Dave Brubeck? it's talk about dreams. And we opened the Newport Jazz Festival with Gates of Justice. And that was the last time I did it, and that's the last time I saw him. Anyway, so that's my story, and I stick to it.
But before you went on this journey, I had asked you about your story about being in the plane and how you told how you were able to provide other people comfort while you were, because of your ability to sing and help them meet their challenging time. Is there a point at which music helped you meet something that was challenging for you?
There have been a lot of challenges in all our lives. I'm not specifically the one to have challenges. I'm insecure in general, always have been.
But is there a moment where music really helped you?
Yeah, you know when? Every time I sing. Every time I sing. When God lets me open my mouth and either daven or sing a Yiddish melody or a Sephardic melody or anything, because I get into it. You know, there's certain things that I sing songs about the Holocaust, I sing songs about everything, and it brings me back to, this is what you're supposed to be doing, and stop worrying about all this other stuff. What are you worried about? This is what you were meant to do, and it brings me to a different place every time I open.
When I think about music solving or helping people meet challenges, I always think of the two most extreme examples that I know of. One is the true story of Hasidim on their way to the gas chambers in the last moment of their lives, not crying, not screaming, but dancing with joy, because they wanted that to be the last moment of their lives. They were not going to give it away to their tormentors.
Yes, sir.
And the other story that comes to me as a powerful message is the story of Eli Wiesel, Zichrono Livracha, who is explaining how it is that he learned himself this song Ani Ma'amin, that he sang so poignantly. The story being that before the Wiesels and the rest of the town of Sikket were deported, they went to shul one Shabbos, and the nephew, I believe, of the Vishnitzer Rebbe came to shul. He had just escaped from one of the camps. And of course, everyone surrounded him and demanded answers. What's going on? What's happening? What should we think about? He refused to answer. He just could not answer. And then they asked him again for the rest of Friday night, and Shabbos, again, the same thing after davening, all day Shabbos. Tell us now even more desperately what's happening. What's going on? Still, he couldn't answer. He wouldn't answer. After Shabbos, again, more desperately asking, tell us, please tell us. Finally, he answers them, but he doesn't answer them by speaking. He answers them by singing. He answers them by singing this Ani Ma'amin that we all know Eli sings so poignantly. He couldn't answer their questions, but he could provide them with an answer for what was going to be facing them. And there's something about music that gives us, music and memory is the past, music and hope is the future, and music of the present is what helps us meet the challenge. But many people know that you have an interesting story, but I'm not sure how many people know, you talked about your mother, but your father was also in Auschwitz. And I know what a great impact that had on that great man who was my privilege to spend many Yom Tovim with you and Debbie. Tell us a little bit about your father and his experience.
Yeah. Well, my mother was hidden, and she has a long story, but she was hidden. She was safe, as safe as you could be during the war. My father, it was Pesach, just before pre-Pesach, and the Nazis sent letters to all the Jews, because they had gotten, of course, all the addresses, that they should send somebody down to pick up the matzah. They were giving matzah at the synagogue to bring home. My father and his youngest brother, they two were so inseparable, you couldn't imagine that one would go somewhere that the other one wouldn't. He was considerably younger than my dad, but they were very, very close. So they went to the shul, and they got thrown into a truck, and they got thrown into a train, and they were taken to Auschwitz, never to see the rest of the family that was killed by the Nazis.
And your father was a Sonderkommando.
I'm going to tell you. Yeah. It's a little tough. Yeah, my father, toward the end, and it had to be at the end because, you know, the Sonderkommando, we were the people that took the bodies out of the gas chambers and put them into the ovens or into pits if it was too hot in the ovens. And I saw a movie where it was said that the Sonderkommando also rushed them into the things, but I believe that was there was a different group that did that. It doesn't matter, who cares? I asked my father one day, Pop, how can you live with this? It's unbelievable, you know, because he made a life. He got married. I mean, it was not easy, but his love for my mother was unbelievable, but it wasn't easy after you come back. And he said, look, today they were dead. Tomorrow we were dead. That was the policy there. So to make a long story short, his brother, Alberto, the youngest, was not in that commando, but because my father was allowed to go get potato peels from the garbage can because he was his undercommando and eat them because it's the only nutrition they had, he would take and throw over the fence to his brother, kept him alive. And when the Russians started coming in and when they blew up one of the crematoria and when they took that forced march in which many people were shot to death because they couldn't keep up. So you can't keep up. My father was weak because, you know, can you imagine? Don't even imagine it. Please forget it. But his brother, who was a little bit stronger, he was younger, he pushed him. He didn't let him fall. He didn't let him stop in the thing. And they got to the train and they put him on the train, and on the train it was snowing. His brother died in the train from cold and from not having food. And my father, during the train when it stopped it was an air raid, it's a long story, he jumped off, and then starts a story of being able to live on after you've been in hell already, after you've been in hell. And then there's a whole story of how he got back and walked to Vienna, and you can't imagine. And eventually the Russians sent him back to Athens. And he was introduced to my mother, not immediately. How many Jewish people of marriageable age were there anymore? And they got married and they had me. And then that's part of the having an angel on your back, and that's why I think children of and I know there are many here probably of survivors of Auschwitz and other camps all have so much. They owe so much to these people. You can't forget it. You can't forget it.
Thank you for sharing that emotional history. Is there a special sui generis category of feelings that you have when you sing at a Yom HaShoah celebration, commemoration? Do you enter into a completely different place?
I enter into the camps. It's like when we visited the museum in Washington. And there's a car, there's one of these train cars sitting there. And it was empty, there was no one around. And I walked onto the cart.
Yeah.
That's it. So, Yom HaShoah. I keep myself straight for people and do El Mole. But yes, I'm on that cart, about to die, because my name is Alberto. That's why, by the way, why do I use Alberto? Let's get into more funny, a little more pleasurable idea. We got to Cleveland. They sent me to the Hebrew Academy, and the head of the academy, I forgot, he was also the head of Tel's Yeshiva a little bit. He says, Mizrahi. He says, what kind of name is this? I said, I'm from Greece. Oh, Mizrahi. He says, was ist dein Yiddish Nomen? I said, Alberto. He says, "What kind of Yiddish name is this? What are you talking about? That's not Yiddish. That's not." He says, "Yeah, not Alberto. What's your Hebrew name?" I said, "Avraham." Avraham. So he writes it down. I became Avraham officially, because I became officially Avraham Mizrahi. My parents called me Alberto, and I was fine. Whatever they want to call me, they call me. I don't give a damn. In fact, I was kind of proud of the fact that I had a Hebrew name that everybody used. Hey. So that kept going, and it was eating me alive because my parents always called me Alberto. I always felt I am Alberto, And by the way, it's not so bad to remember his brother that died in the train car. And I wanted to do it, and eventually it was my second last position when I went to California. I felt a freedom that I hadn't felt in any other state of America. Hey, we lived in La Jolla. You go down to, what are you doing for lunch? I'm going to go snorkeling for a while. And then I'm going to have. I mean, it was a different kind of life. So I changed my name officially back to Alberto, and that's why I call myself Alberto. It's not like I'm trying to be an operatic star or something. I did that already. Forget about it.
It's not a stage name. It's your real name.
It is not a stage name. Avraham isn't a stage name either. But hey, I was Alberto my entire life. My father died at 92. He never called me anything else.
Mati, I'm going to insert myself here a little bit because I want to respond to some of the questions that have been advanced in the chat. Abe, in this generation of the American cantorate, there's no one whose talent is more prolific than yours and who represents the very best of a model when you stand there to sing Kol or Davin on Yontif, who represents a model of the great chazanim of days past, who could captivate a congregation with their singing. One of the things that has been asked by one of the people listening to this is, and you kind of alluded to this earlier in an offhanded way by saying if you could play guitar, you'd last another 10 years. I heard
being facetiously.
Yeah, I understand. We rabbis suffered the same thing. Okay, so what I'm wondering is, and what the questioner has asked, is it seems that the trend in our time is against the phenomenon of chazanut being an auditory experience. It's moved much more from recitative into congregations wanting participatory experience. And what's really interesting is when you juxtapose that with the period in which we're living of COVID, where we're being told even that singing is potentially one of the more dangerous activities because you project, and you can disseminate germs. What is your feeling really about where cantorial music is going, classical cantorial music, and the direction of the cantorate?
I think there's no doubt that we are going into a new generation, completely already have actually. I keep forgetting that I'm getting older. I think that I'm one of them. No, I'm not 42 years old. No, I'm not 35. I'm not even 25. What's happening is that folk music has taken over because it's so easy to sing. If you sing a song that has 5 notes, everybody in the congregation can sing it with you. Rarely do you hear a full Musaf or Shacharit anymore. It's always Hech Kedusha most of the time. I get to do it a lot of the time, thank God, and because I can. And now, are there other chazanim that are younger? Yes, I've trained a number of people at the seminary. Haven't been there in a couple of years, I'm sorry to say, but it's gotten busy. But the fact is that the kids that are good, they're older than I was when I was there, but they want chazanut for themselves. They want to say, I am a chazan and I can daven. And the school helps them do that because it brings a lot of coaches. But when you talk to the general public, I guess, because they don't come to me with this, they want to sing. They just want to sing. They just want to sing. It's the Christians do it. The Catholics have changed to that a long time ago. I mean, you don't hear the Verdi Requiem very often in synagogue, in church. And I think for us, I wish, let me tell you one thing. When I first went into the Cantor's Institute, and the reason was because I just heard my first album of Chazanut. I had never heard Chazanut in my life until Danny Gildar brought me to his house because he had a record, the 99-cent record of Yosef Rosenblatt. It was a 99 cents, maybe $1.99, I don't remember. I think it was 99. And he played me this, and I was so astounded. It was my film experience. It was Mario Lanza doing Rigoletto, but instead of that, it's this Mario Lanza that's doing davening. And I went, you mean you can be an opera singer and still do chazanas? I couldn't believe it. And what I found out was that that was then, he was the greatest, one of the greatest, but Moshe Koussevitzky, but those guys were all going, and that whole era was getting weaker and weaker. Moshe Genshin was still alive, and he was still singing, and David Koussevitzky, and a few, but very few. So I knew that I was, what do you call somebody who's going in on the tail end of something and is never going to be able to keep it forever? But I knew I was going into that, but I was so amazed by the fact that you could do that, that I said, fine. I don't think a young or youngish chazan can have that experience again. I watch on the computer. Cantor's Assembly are my friends, and all of them are decent and good. Some of really good chazanim. But all they talk about, I can't do it anymore, I'll die. But all they talk about is exchanging tunes. Well, you have to sit on the floor and play with the kids and teach them music. I agree with that 100%. I never did it, but I wasn't in that world. And by the time I got to this age, I'm not in that world. So not that I can't, I'm very good with kids, but they don't know that. Don't tell anybody. All right. But that's what's become is, oh, you can do this, and why don't we do this, and we'll do a Hech Kadusha, and then you'll come back and you'll sing Shalom Aleichem. You'll sing, So I think it's gone. It's certainly going very, very quickly. And I don't like to think of myself as dying, but there's not a lot of guys in this world, except for there are some shuls that have incredible chazanim still, 1 or 2, 3. I can think of 3. 2 incredible, 1 really good, okay? They're not to be named. And then you have the Orthodox. Then you have the ultra-Orthodox, but not the ultra. The Orthodox, that's still like a chazan in concert. But even they don't daven with chazanas. They don't. I've been to those places in Israel, and I go like, oh, please. I mean, that's not davening, but it is. That's what davening is today. So the guys, I hope that, and they have gorgeous voices. It's a plethora of people with beautiful tenor voices and other baritones. I forgive baritones for being so low. Just kidding. But you have these guys that can really, really sing, and they don't have jobs. They'll keep it alive for a while, but even their chazanis isn't what chazanis was in the 50s, and the 40s, and the 30s, the 20s, in the 60s, and the 70s, and hopefully occasionally even in my shul today.
Abe, I appreciate your candor in responding, and it's painful to listen to.
Truth is truth.
Yeah, truth is truth, and the truth is that we could talk also about evolving roles of rabbis too. From great speakers to facilitators of public experience, and it would be
financial wizards.
Yeah, really. Other people, for sure. So I did want to ask you if you would just spend a minute or two as we sort of wind down a little bit here, talk about the role that Zamir has played in your musical life, both being in the chorale and in your work with the foundation through the years.
Zamir Chorale. I didn't know there was such a thing, of course, when I got to New York. And I got into one of the first, times we were rehearsing and stuff. I'm terrible at sight reading, terrible. So, but today I can, sight read pretty good. I mean, when you have to memorize an opera overnight, you got to read. But when I came, I said, "You mean there are Jewish people?" Because I didn't know too many people, people in the school. And I get in there, and there's this room full of enthusiastic young people. There's Matthew Lazar, there's Skolnick, there are all these people. And I meet you, and we start singing, and I was in another world. I was in a complete, Zamir Chorale, not only, it didn't, I mean, my love of music was always there. The Rosenblatt album, honest to God, is the thing that got me to say, I'm going to be a chazan. But you guys taught me that there's so much different stuff to Jewish music, and it's all fabulous. It's unbelievable. The people that write the music, the people that, and then you have a Matthew Lazar conducting. The guy's a genius. So not just about conducting. He's a teacher. He's he loves what he's doing, and that's the main thing. He, his wife, you, everybody that was there because of a love for Judaism and a love for Jewish music. What I think what Mati has done is improve because I remember at the end of rehearsals, I felt we had done a great job with this wonderful Jewish music. I think with Mati, it's become like he teaches inside. He teaches you, this song is about love. This song is about, he makes you feel that you are being more and more Jewish. And not everybody that goes into this choir feels that way, but when they come out, they really feel that way. And that has to do with Mati. It's a very strong suit. And by the way, Hazamir turns me on no way. I mean, I see 500-600 kids on this thing singing magnificently. Holy cow. So yeah, what it's done is it showed me a different life of music, of Jewish music, and something that I was going to love. And also it made a family. I mean, we were a family. I think we still are, most of us, even if we don't see each other and, every 3 years. But just being here and I see people and I'm going, oh yeah, I used to sit there. Yeah, we had a good time. It's an amazing thing that happened over these years. And I think it's in an apex right now. I think it really is, especially with Hazamir. Because Zamir, many of us would be still singing. If I was in New York, I'd still be singing with Zamir. But Hazamir, that's the future of the Jewish people. Truly the future of the Jewish people and of Israel. So you can't get me off I may not have given this speech before, but if ever asked, I would. To anyone and everyone. And that's why I send money. I mean, I've made a little money, so some of it's got to go to Zamir because they represent what I would do if I could.
On that felicitous note, Abe.
Yeah. Did I do something wrong?
No, you actually did something perfectly right, okay? Because you afforded me a segue into what I wanted to say at the conclusion of this conversation. And I'll just preface it by saying, apropos what you said about walking into Zamir and discovering a world of Jewish music that you didn't really know was there, I distinctly remember, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but the first time I heard the choir, my sister had been in the choir before me, and I came with my parents, because we were living in New Jersey.
I remember that.
To pick her up from rehearsal. And the rehearsal at that time was in one of the rooms in the old TI building at JTS. And I was standing out.
Unterberg Auditorium.
It wasn't even there yet. And
really? Okay.
I was standing outside the door, and of all the pieces of Jewish music on planet Earth that I could have heard Zamir doing as a first exposure, it was Hava Nagila.
Oh my God.
But I remember thinking, I never heard Hava Nagila sound like that in my life. It was syncopated, it was rhythmic, it was in 4-part harmony, it was exciting. And I said to myself, it's like that great Mel Brooks line, there's more to God, where he recognizes, he hears thunder and he says, God's bigger than Phil. I said, there's more to Jewish music than what I've ever known. and it turned me into a fanatic for the choir, which I joined the nanosecond that I was eligible. And I think that what you've pointed to and what you and Mati have illustrated so magnificently in this discussion is the fact that Zamir and the role that it played for you in the Jewish acculturation into that world of music, for someone of your prodigious talent, the Zamir Choral Foundation continues to acculturate and to educate and to promulgate an appreciation of and a practice of quality Jewish music, starting with even pre-high school kids in Haza Prep, going through Hazamir, which you spoke of so glowingly, and the Zamir Chorale, and Zamir Noded, and the North American Jewish Choral Festival, and all of these exercises, not only in Jewish music, but in preaching and teaching love of Jews of all persuasions and stripes. When you walked into Zamir, as I walked into Zamir, I was a naive little kid from the Orthodox Jewish community in Bayonne, New Jersey. What did I know from Reformed Jews and conservative? I had no idea. All I knew, as Mati would say, there's no Orthodox, there's no Reformed, there's no conservative. There are sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses. And that was my introduction into the egalitarian world of Jewish choral singing. And all of these expressions of Jewish music teach love of Israel in a painful and difficult time, and teach love of other Jews at a painful and difficult time, and give us reason to hope. And all of us are inspired through the music that the Zamir Choral Foundation brings to bear on our lives. As an officer of the foundation, I want to make sure that you know that we are on really the last day, you're getting in at the tail end of this, the opportunity to take advantage of a matching grant, dollar for dollar, with a very generous donor, that for every dollar that you give to the foundation, that dollar will be matched. And we're close to meeting our goal, but we're not there. And you need to understand, I hope you can understand, and trust me when I say that I'm from the nonprofit world too. I'm the rabbi of a synagogue, and I understand what it means to be trying to keep your head above water during the period of COVID-19. But, you know, artistic foundations like ours that do nothing that anybody else is doing, we're struggling, and you are our saviors. So I want to encourage you to translate Abe's vibrant commitment to the power of what Zamir meant to him, and all of us who love this organization. And I've been watching in the chats people whose memories go back, like mine, 50 years of singing. And you can find the link to donate in the chat room here on this Zoom call. You can click on that link. It'll take you to the website, and it'll also be on the screen as we play out. So to all of you, thank you so much for participating, and I wish you all good health. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Amen, and have a good Shavuos.
Shavuos, yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Abe.
Thank you, Mati.
Thank you, Mati.
Truly.